Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome. Please make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe for future coverage. So, it is March 13th, the year of our Lord 2023, and I have some more news here. Another update concerning the situation in Bakhmut. So, if you're new to the channel here, I'm going to show you where exactly is Bakhmut right now in Ukraine. As you can see, this whole area here is the front lines. You can go look up this map on Google. It's called Live UA Map. Now, this map is actually pro-Ukrainian. It was actually designed by Ukrainian engineers. So everything they report usually tends to be a little behind of what is actually being reported. So they take a while to update the map. But of course, one of the fierce points right now in this war, of course, is Bakhmut, which if we zoom in, we can see right here. Now, this is a very strategic city, and as a matter of fact, it is a point of great resistance for the Ukrainians. Zelensky himself has said that Bakhmut is a fortress. Some of Zelensky's generals a couple of months ago said that it was an impregnable fortress. So they were acting like Bakhmut was invincible. But we can clearly see here via this pro-Ukrainian map that the Russians are advancing into the city here. However, Zelensky, contrary to what the United States has been advising him, pretty much telling him now for weeks to pull his forces out of Bakhmut, that it was pretty much a lost cause, and that it wasn't worth to keep his soldiers there and allow them to get encircled, as we're seeing here, or slaughtered there by the Russian artillery, and that it would be better for him to save those troops and forces for a later conflict, right, somewhere else. But again, Zelensky said it was a fortress, and I guess his pride took over, or maybe his bad decision making, and he decided to double down. And so he keeps sending troops into Bakhmut. And of course, we now have the Institute for the Study of War, which is a Washington-based think tank. Essentially, it's the United States who are supposedly analyzing the conflict, but everything they put out is obviously biased for Ukraine. They pretty much try to underreport everything that is going on. They try to underreport on Russia's advances, and anytime they actually have to admit that Russia is advancing, they always try to put some sort of negative spin like, thousands of Russians are dying. Yes, they might be advancing, but Ukraine is killing a whole bunch of them. Russia can't keep this up for much longer. So we are going to be reading here from two articles. This is from the BBC, and then we'll take a quick look at this article here from Yahoo Live. But yeah, you see here, it says, Ukraine war, heavy losses reported as battle for Bakhmut rages. So again, most of the articles right now are pretty much saying that it looks like the Russian offensive there in Bakhmut is stalling. But this is coming out of the Institute for the Study of War, which, again, I like to call it the Propaganda Institute for the Study of War, because it's just a whole bunch of propaganda from the United States. And what's actually happening here in Bakhmut right now is that the Russian forces aren't stalling, guys. You can clearly see here, literally a couple of days ago and weeks ago, they were outside of the city. They've crossed the river towards the center of the city already. They're pushing in from the north and also from the south. Again, Zelensky called it a fortress for a reason. There's a lot of buildings there, right? A lot of places for the Ukrainian forces to hide and sort of drag the conflict on for a while there in the city. And so the Russians have been bombarding the city. But again, there are a lot of buildings there which the Ukrainian forces are using, and again, it was one of the most fortified areas or cities in this region. As a matter of fact, it's probably the most fortified until now, of course, since the Russians are advancing. But what is happening here is that, again, Zelensky has doubled down, and he still hasn't given the order to pull his forces out of there. And so they actually continue to pump forces into here. And I've called this the pit of death because it's not so much that the Russians have stalled, but really, if you're the Russians and you see the enemy forces continue to try and cling on to the city, why wouldn't you just continue to shell and destroy the army as it gets trapped inside of the city? But again, this is all due to the arrogance of Zelensky. And so the Institute for the Study of War is trying to put a positive spin on this, saying that the Russian forces have stalled in there when it's not the truth. So we're now seeing here this article mentioned that there's heavy losses on both sides. Again, the Ukrainians pretty much every time they lose a city and pretty much throughout the whole conflict have been claiming that they're killing, thousands of Russians and whatnot. Of course, the Russians also give their figures as to how many Ukrainian soldiers they are killing, as we're about to read here. But me and you can't verify these numbers. Not even the BBC or any of these mainstream media news sources can verify this. Again, nobody's going in there to actually count the bodies, right? This is just news media conglomerates or companies pretty much giving us the information that they're receiving from the Ukrainian command and as well as from the Russians. So nobody can verify this, right? You really can't take a look at what really happened on the battlefield until after the war is over. The only thing that we have to go on is the advances that the armies are making, and it's pretty obvious, regardless of how many Russian soldiers Ukraine wants to claim they've killed, that Russia is advancing, guys. Again, look at all of this. This is red. This is Russia. This is now Russian territory that Russia has taken over. And so we know that Russia, just by looking at this, they are winning the war. Again, nobody is actually able to verify the number of casualties on either side. Now, if you were to ask me my opinion, I believe that the Ukrainian casualties are far greater in number than the Russians. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into this article by the BBC here. It says, Ukraine and Russia have reported inflicting heavy losses as the battle for Bakhmut rages on. Moscow has been trying to take the eastern Ukrainian city for months in a grinding war of attrition. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russian forces had suffered more than 1,100 deaths in the past few days. Again, nobody can confirm that, guys. Not even the people that are actually there, right? Even if you have a reporter from the BBC there on the front lines, he's not going around actually counting the bodies, right? So this is pretty much just, information that these governments give out to, try to make themselves look good. And again, both sides do this, but in my personal opinion, I do believe that the casualties for Ukraine are much, much higher than the Russian forces. But anyways, so he said more than 1,100 deaths in the past few days. This is past few days, with many more seriously injured. Russia said it had killed more than 220 Ukrainian service members over the past 24 hours. Remember, they call this battle a meat grinder because, I believe the Ukrainians even said that the soldiers that are sent to the front lines have about 4 hours of life expectancy. So just imagine the situation there. The BBC is unable to verify the numbers given by either side. Like I said, analysts say Bakhmut has little strategic value. This is not true. Zelensky, who is the leader of the Ukrainian forces, has directly contradicted this. If anybody should know, it's probably him. But again, the West is trying to downplay the situation here because if they're honest about it, Russia is going to win this conflict unless Ukraine is helped directly by the U.S. or NATO, or unless they receive nuclear weapons. But that's not going to happen. Um, so yeah, they say analysts say Bakhmut has little strategic value, but it has become a focal point for Russian commanders who have struggled to deliver any positive news to the Kremlin. That's not true. Again, for the past couple of weeks and months, Russian forces have been advancing. They might not be advancing at the pace that some would like, or that some people thought they would, but they are advancing. So it says capture of the city would bring Russia slightly closer to its goal of controlling the whole of Donetsk region. Now, before I go on there, guys, again, once Bakhmut falls here, as you can see, the Russians have already gone far past Bakhmut. Again, my opinion is that they're using this as a trap, a death trap here. They're allowing Zelensky to pump in forces in order to destroy them. And a lot of those forces are actually some of the most elite, which we're going to be reading about in that Yahoo article there. But if we go to the north, we can see that Russia is pushing forward here with other forces. As a matter of fact, they're only a couple of kilometers here from Slavyansk and Kramatorsk here, which are pretty much their next objectives here. And it's going to give them a major victory, as we're reading here in the Donetsk region. So it goes on here. One of 4 regions in eastern and southern Ukraine annexed by Russia last September following referendums widely condemned outside Russia as a sham. Again, this is the United States, right? Anything Russia does, they call it a sham because it doesn't suit their interests. But the people there did vote. The majority of the population there speak Russian. They have a Russian culture, and they wanted to be part of Russia. So Ukrainian commanders who have committed significant resources to defending the city say their strategy aims to tie Russian forces down and prevent Moscow from launching any further offensives in the coming months. In less than a week, starting from 6th of March, we managed to kill more than 1,100 enemy soldiers in the Bakhmut sector alone, Russia's irreversible loss right there near Bakhmut, Mr. Zelensky said in his nightly video address. Again, who's actually counting how many soldiers they're killing? Nobody, guys. Again, you're not going to know the actual casualties till after the war. And even then, remember, history is written by the victor. So this is just pretty much propaganda here. He added that 1,500 Russian soldiers would wounded. Now, I'm not saying you can't estimate the approximate number, right? But usually the side that is losing tends to inflate numbers. And again, there is a lot of exaggeration in wars. So, you got to take all of this information with a grain of salt here. Russia's defense ministry said Russian forces had killed more than 220 Ukrainian servicemen. The commander of Ukraine's Grand Forces, Colonel Gen Alexander Zursky, said the Russian mercenary Wagner Group was attacking his troops from several directions in a bid to break through defenses and advance to the central districts of the town. So it's just going to go into more information we've already heard before, but we'll jump over to the Yahoo Live article because it directly ties into what we just read there at the end. As you can see here, it says all 500 original members of a Ukrainian battalion were killed or wounded in fighting with Russia, commander says. So this is a Ukrainian commander that is admitting this. The war in Ukraine is bleeding both sides, with each suffering more than 100,000 military casualties since Russia launched its full-scale invasion last year. But with Moscow able to draft fighters from a population that dwarfs that of Ukraine, there is growing concern that Kyiv is less capable of suffering sustained losses, and that this will jeopardize its ability to strike back this spring, the Washington Post reported on Monday. Right, so the U.S. is trying to make it seem like, the only reason that Russia is winning is because they have way more soldiers. The Ukrainian forces are way more elite. They're way better, but unfortunately, they just don't have the numbers. So this is that old World War II stereotype, right? That, Russia's just carelessly just sending their soldiers right into battle, not caring for their lives because they have so many soldiers. That's actually how they defeat the enemy. But again, that's just a Western propaganda. Yeah, it is true. Russia is much bigger. They are a much bigger army. They are a much stronger army, more technologically advanced, and they have nuclear weapons. So, again, Ukraine never really stood a chance unless, there's some unforeseen event where, Ukraine actually gets a hold of nuclear weapons, or the U.S. or NATO like join in the war, boots on the ground. But I don't believe that's going to happen. So yeah, this is pretty much just propaganda. They're trying to make it seem like the only reason Russia is winning is because they have a lot more troops, which is not the case. They are moving forward strategically. They are using missiles, drones, advanced tactics in order to defeat the Ukrainian forces. So it goes on here. The gravity of the situation is illustrated by the experience of Ukraine's 46th Air Assault Brigade. A commander of a battalion within the brigade told the Post that he'd lost every one of the 500 people he commanded back in February 2022, leading them to be replaced with fresh recruits far less capable on the battlefield. So it seems that what is happening here, guys, is that without a doubt, Ukraine, the Ukrainian soldiers are putting up a strong resistance here in Bakhmut, but this is coming at a high cost, and this is due to Zelensky's choices. He is sending a lot of his elite units into Bakhmut, and yes, they are slowing down the advance of the Russians, but in my opinion, the Russians are taking advantage of this, and so this is why this is considered a meat grinder, because as you can imagine, the Ukrainian forces come into Bakhmut here, and then they get killed, and the Russians don't necessarily, they're not necessarily advancing quickly through the city, but more Russian forces keep getting pumped into the city here, and Russia just continues to bombard and kill the forces. That's why I call it a pit of death. And again, this also contradicts the rumor by the West that Russia was running out of ammunition. That is not the case. If that were the case, then the Ukrainian army might be able to, form some offensive here and start pushing the forces back. But they can't do that because they're constantly being bombarded, right, with mortar strikes and with missile strikes. And so, again, I think this is a historical blunder here on Zelensky's part, and I think this is going to cost him dearly. And once, as we're seeing here, the Russian forces are advancing. Don't let the Western propaganda machine tell you any different. They are slowly moving in from the north here. Again, they've crossed the river already. They're moving in from the south, but they are moving in slowly because Zelensky keeps pumping forces into here. But they're going to continue to grind down these forces, and then once it's clear that they've taken control of the center, then we'll probably stop seeing this pumping in of forces here. And so what's going to happen here is that this is going to allow Russia to move rather quickly here through these next towns towards Kramatorsk and Slavyansk here. And as you can see, they're already set up for that. So once Bakhmut collapses here, guys, there's going to be like a big red tidal wave coming in towards these cities. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. And again, remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.